story, and I want to be honest with you from the very beginning. I am not normal. I'm just not. And why do I say this? For starters, I'm a musician. I'm of that rare sect of quirky individuals who makes a living emoting in song, and at least in my case, continuing to dress like a college kid well into adulthood. I also have a husband and 4 kids who make our lives bonkers. Josie is 8, the twins Ben and Griffin are 6, and little Timothy is 3 going on 30. So a normal day at our house includes Josie trying to learn her math facts and regrouping, which is a term that they've invented since I was a kid. Who changes math? While the twins are fighting over pretty much anything. They literally came home with a note the other day from their teacher saying they were fighting over a urinal in the school bathroom. I guess it's a twin thing. And Timothy, he is the sweetest little boy until you try to stand between him and whatever snack he has climbed to the very top of the pantry to retrieve. Then he proceeds to scream, "Yah-yee pop, yah-yee pop," at the top of his lungs until Martin and I finally relent and give our spoiled 4th child said "yah-yee pop" just to bring some order and peace in our home. A house full of 4 kids 8 and under is anything but normal. But our departure from normal really began before all the kids. For those of you who don't know me from Adam, a big part of my story is that my husband Martin, to whom I've been married for 16 years, was diagnosed with a brain tumor within our first couple years. Fast forward to today, Martin is living a thriving life, coaching baseball at our kids' school, working at a local coffee shop, but he still lives life with a brain injury. For the past 10 years, Martin has learned to navigate life with both vision and memory limitations, which are a result of the tumor. He could tell you better than I, but living life with a short-term memory deficit is extremely difficult. We have a great life together, but it looks very different than the standard, the expected, the normal families all around us. But when you think about it, what is normal anyway? Is it the common way of life we see around us? A standard we try to live up to? Is it the lifestyle we've always known, or maybe something you're striving to achieve? Maybe normal is a routine in which you find your sanity each day, like for me, a standard cup of coffee, or showing up at work to a nice orderly desk. There's something sacred about a good routine. But rather than defining normal, it may be easier to recognize the absence of it. I remember in middle school feeling like the most abnormal oddball. Some of it was self-imposed, I admit. I was in orchestra, or as my high school sweetheart, now husband, called it, the dorchestra. I was the lone girl in the string bass section, and when all the other girls hopped out of their cars in the mornings with their ballet or gymnastics bag for their after-school activities, I unloaded a 40-pound bass from the back of my mom's wood panel station wagon. For most of us, as we look back on our middle school days, normal was this elusive pipe dream. I was always one fashion fad behind what the cool kids were wearing. I can laugh about it now, but you know, every now and then, I still catch myself pondering, what would it take for me to feel normal? To feel accepted, to feel valued, if only I could be a little more normal. I'd like to begin our time together reflecting on this word normal, because you may be asking yourself, what's so bad about normal? And why would I want to commit 5 weeks to saying so long to it? Those are great questions. Some of you may relate to a disability in your own life, like our family, or maybe it's a different life situation that makes you feel less than normal. Maybe you struggle to find community or even emotional stability due to how abnormal your circumstances seem. Maybe it's not a disability at all. Maybe for you, it's more of a deep feeling of inadequacy. Maybe you've never felt normal, and you've always struggled to live up to whatever cultural standard you or someone else has set for you. Maybe that feeling of inadequacy or inferiority comes from a past that was anything but normal. Maybe you were raised in a home fractured by divorce or addiction. Maybe your current home bears that brokenness. And then there's others of you who are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, whose lives are completely normal. Maybe your life is predictable, it's comfortable, maybe it's even boring. Maybe you've longed for something different just to break up the monotony. Here's the point of surveying what we consider or know as normal. It doesn't matter if normal is something you never knew, something you've always tried to attain, or something you've grown tired of. I'm inviting you to embark on a thrilling journey of leaving normal because what God has in store is better. Why settle for normal when God calls us to an adventure? Now, before you start to think, she's one of those crazy ladies. Next thing, she's going to challenge me to sell all my possessions and move to Africa to live in a small hut. Maybe, but probably not. Because saying goodbye to normal doesn't necessarily require a big life change, but it does involve a heart change. In saying goodbye to normal, we find a freedom that only comes when we learn to no longer lean on the familiar for security. We find a peace that can only begin when we no longer need that lifelong blueprint in order to feel confident about our future. Though there's nothing wrong with predictability and order and sameness, wouldn't it be amazing if we could still have joy in life even when the things of our lives shift and change? The book of Hebrews has been called by many Bible commentators the book of better things. In the first few chapters alone, we hear how Jesus is better than the angels. He's the very radiance of the glory of God. In chapter 3, we hear how Jesus is better than Moses. Then in chapter 4, that Jesus is our great high priest, and it emphasizes the once and for all nature of Christ's sacrifice. And in the midst of all this extraordinary news, the writer seems to make a bit of a shift. In the midst of all of the better things discussed and described, chapter 6 through 11, the writer of Hebrews begins to speak of a shaking. And I'm not sure what image comes to mind when I say the word shaking. Maybe it's an earthquake, a shaken can of soda, the chaos from my 3-year-old doing a cannonball onto the Lego creation my older kids have painstakingly worked for hours on. Whatever you're picturing, it sounds like a stretch to label any shaking as a better thing. But as we continue to read in chapter 12, we see the writer is bringing up a chaotic shaking to illuminate something that truly is better, a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Hear these words from chapter 12, verse 26. Yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. And he continues on in the back half of verse 27 and into 28, in order that the things that cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, let us be grateful, receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. This concept of being shaken is actually taken from the Old Testament book of Haggai, where this prophet speaks God's words to the people of Israel, saying this: "This is what the Lord Almighty says, in a little while I will once more shake the heavens and the earth, the seas and the dry land. I will shake all the nations, and what is desired by all nations will come, and I will fill this house with glory, says the Lord Almighty." I know it's a little corny, but I can't help but saying it. There's a whole lot of shaking going on. Am I right? But now let's go back to this piece that I don't want to skip over, even though it may be a jarring concept for some. In the very first verse I quoted, notice who is doing the shaking. Does anyone else feel uncomfortable with this idea? That the God of the universe, who brought complete chaos into order, that he would bring such destruction? That our loving God would not only allow the shaking in our lives, but might sometimes be the very source of it? How do we reconcile this with the description of God that we see in the scripture as a whole, and as a God of love who cares for his children like a nursing mother? Could God really be the cause of the shaking in our lives? Let me tell you a quick story to try to bring these seemingly conflicting pictures of God into focus. My husband Martin and I live in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. And in the housing market crash of 2008, we were able to purchase a home for about 60% of its actual value, which is why we could afford it. The only problem was it was a foreclosure, and there were several things that were damaged in the home and even dangerous, which brings me to the back deck. The home inspector said, "Don't even step on it." And Martin, the rule follower that he is, quickly abided and kept the deadbolt permanently locked until we saved up enough money to tear it down and replace it. I, on the other hand, who's always been a little more open-minded, just wasn't really sure what the big deal was. I mean, I'm no home inspector, but it looked sturdy to me. Yes, it was missing a few support beams and sagging in a couple spots, but couldn't we just take a couple lawn chairs out there and test it out? Fortunately, Martin never let me try that, and he tore it down within a few days of us moving in. But as we reflect on the role God plays in the shaking of our lives, have you ever considered that He may shake the less sturdy things from our lives out of kindness and mercy? If we believe God to be all-knowing and all-loving, wouldn't it be cruel for Him to allow His children to lean upon structures or build our lives upon foundations that aren't sound? And these faulty foundations may not necessarily be bad things. Like, it's a good thing to pour ourselves into our marriage, into our family. It's a good thing to work hard and invest heavily in your job. But when these things become what we look to for our stability, we not only set ourselves up for potential disappointment, we distort them as idols rather than as gifts from God. When our children become the source of our validation, we no longer seek to bless them, but tirelessly work to modify their behavior so that they will bless us. When our jobs or our volunteer positions in our community and church begin to play a dominating role in how we see ourselves or how we see others, we serve to be satisfied rather than to meet the needs of others. But the greater damage is this: there is no foundation that can hold us in this life or the next but Jesus Christ. No sturdy foundation apart from Jesus. Here's the point. God is calling each of us to a place of stepping out, of letting go of whatever earthly thing you are leaning on for stability, for security, for value. He allows the shaking of all of the normal that we might find something greater, something even tremendous, as we learn to trust our lives more fully to Him. So, are you ready? Here's what this journey will look like over the next few weeks. First, we will say two pretty important goodbyes, one to what's familiar, and then one to our own identity. But we won't stay in so long land for very long. We have an adventure to embark upon. We will soon learn to say hello to the new life that God has in store for everyone who lives by faith, and to say welcome to a new mission in which He promises to do more through us than we can ask or imagine. Isn't this an exciting idea? Before we close, if you're feeling a little trepidatious about starting this study, and really this entire journey, let me tell you a quick story about my own encounter with fear when facing a big step in life. A more literal step, I might say. The church where I work has a Zipline. Now, before you start thinking it's a new zany method of baptism, our church also has a summer camp, which is its primary purpose. But throughout the year, the church opens the rope course to other businesses and ministries for team building activities. And I will never forget that horrible day of receiving that notice in my inbox. Staff team building opportunity. Any of you who have gotten such an email know exactly what I'm talking about. Will they make us do the trust fall while singing Kumbaya? Can you really call it an opportunity if it's mandatory? When I looked on the location line, my heart sunk even further when I read those two dreaded words, ropes course. I wish I could tell you that I mustered up the faith to do it with a positive attitude, but the truth is, I was a big baby, like the entire time. I think I thought that the Wrangler staff would eventually get tired of my whining and just let me go team build by myself at Starbucks. But that was not the case. And the pinnacle of the entire team building day was, you guessed it, the Zipline. So as I crawled up the tower using the cargo net, 1,000 anxious thoughts were running through my mind. My first thought was how unbelievably out of shape I was. Really would have killed me to do a few push-ups over the past 10 years. Next, I noticed that the ground seemed to be leaving me the further I ascended. Such an obvious observation, I know. I also thought about how I probably should have gotten the will done that my parents had encouraged me to do. Many things rolling around my head as I climbed up those 60 feet to the top of the platform. But by the time I made it to the top, my whole body was shaking. I exchanged pleasantries with the nice man at the top who was connecting my rope lanyard to the 1,350-foot zipline. And after a brief safety check, I think he noticed that I might be a little anxious. It could have been the tears welling up in my eyes, the trembling of my entire body, or the fact that I was holding his arm so tightly he was beginning to lose circulation in his hand. Whatever it was, I will never forget the words that came out of his mouth prior to the gentle nudge he gave me off of the platform. Laura, I could tell you that this zip line can hold up to 5,000 pounds, but that's not what's really going to reassure you, he said. The step you're about to take requires courage, and this is the part I really want you to hear. He said, having courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's acknowledging that fear and being willing to take that next step anyway. Let me say that one more time. Having courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's acknowledging that fear and being willing to take the next step anyway. So, are you ready? Are you ready to say so long to normal? Are you willing to take the true faith step and invite God to shape your story and work in your life in a way that you've never known before? It's okay if you're scared. And it's okay if you're apprehensive. All you really need to be is willing. And together we will, as Paul says in Ephesians 3, invite God to do in and through us exceedingly more than we can ask or imagine. To him be the glory.